Calls from within Britain to leave the European Union have been pretty loud since the moment it joined in 1973. 2 years later, a referendum was held on UK membership of what was then the European Economic Community. 67% of voters chose to stay. But Europe remained a deeply divisive issue throughout the 1980s, especially within Margaret Thatcher's Conservative Party. In fact, it's one of the reasons she was forced to resign in 1990. Well, a couple of years after that, and European leaders signed the Maastricht Treaty, and that created the modern-day EU. Prime Minister John Major defeated a campaign for a referendum on the treaty, but only just. Well, fast forward to the late 90s and Tony Blair's Labour Party is in power, and his government opted out of joining the euro currency. Well, the talk of the 2000s was all about an EU constitution to update and strengthen the union's governing framework. But this caused an uproar, with French and Dutch voters rejecting it in referenda. The watered-down Lisbon Treaty replaced it and was ratified by the British in 2008, but without a referendum. And this is when we really see intensified calls in Britain for it to withdraw from the EU. Well, in 2010, the Conservatives under David Cameron were back in power with a new generation of more Eurosceptic lawmakers. This was also the height of the Eurozone debt crisis. Remember those bailouts for Greece, Portugal, Ireland and Cyprus. Well, under huge internal party pressure, Cameron pledged to renegotiate Britain's relationship with the EU and hold a referendum on membership after the next election. Winning a surprise majority in 2015, David Cameron knew he'd have to make good on his promise. So the next year is spent in frantic talks with other European leaders. And don't forget, this is when the European migrant crisis is intensifying. And then this February, Cameron announces he's made a deal to bring more powers back home. Among the concessions are limits on benefits for EU migrants living in the UK. But critics weren't impressed. So the referendum date is set, June 23rd. And here is the simple question it all comes down to. Now, this is actually a photo of my ballots that I returned by post just a few weeks ago. So decades of political manoeuvring have been leading up to this moment, and the results could change the UK's relationship with the world for generations.